10, D.D. Gregorius to home, but hey, it worked. I'm just saying, look at the players, look at the underlying numbers, and when you do, I think you'll agree that Matt Olson and Rhys Hoskins, both first basemen, that you should keep. Now, talk about some more players. The decision is yours. I'm just laying it out there. What about Mike Moustakas? Mike Moustakas traded to Cincinnati. He's a 250, 260 hitter in his career. We know that. He's a World Series champion. He's owned in almost every fantasy league. And he's won for his last 9. And he's hitting 212 on the year with only 2 home runs and only 8 RBIs. Are you a believer that Cincinnati, who went out in the offseason, they supposedly improved their pitching, supposedly improved their lineup, they're 4 games under 500, do you think Moustakas can turn it around in the last month? And I think he can. He's third base, second base eligible. He's going to get playing time as long as he stays healthy. Of course, that's the case with anybody, right? As long as they stay healthy, they're going to play. And he's not a 212 kind of hitter. Keep him. Trade for him. Here's the thing. Somebody in your league owns these guys I'm talking about this morning. They're ultimately frustrated with them. And do you think a trade... Let's throw this out there. You don't like to do this. What about if you own Solano for the Giants, whose average now is down to 363. Remember, it wasn't long ago, he was at 424. How about a Solano for a Moustakas? I think it's a great trade if I'm going to get Moustakas in that trade. I think you look at players who started really hot. Face it, most players don't hit 400 more than a month. And when that happens, they go down quickly. Solano's average has dropped almost 80%. Or 80 points, excuse me. Moustakas will not be a 280 hitter. Moustakas will not be a 300 hitter. But could he hit 300 for a streak to get his average up to 240, 250? And the answer is yes. For you Chicago Cub fans out there listening, and I know there are some, there's several disappointments going on here. There's Chris Bryant, who's on the IL with a damaged ring finger. I can't remember if it's just injured or broken. I think it's just injured. He's out till probably sometime next week. Good morning, Brad Matthews. And then there's Javi Baez. How many of you fantasy owners drafted Javi Baez in the first 2 or 3 rounds of your draft, and you're looking at Javi Baez, and he's hitting 200 this morning with 3 home runs, 10 RBIs. Over his last 5 games, he's 3 for 16 with a 188 average. And I'm watching the game yesterday between the Cubs and the White Sox, and Steve Stone, the announcer, said on a pitch that was a hanging slider, Baez fouled it off, and Stone said, if Baez were hot right now, that ball would have gone either out of the park or would have been a line drive somewhere for an extra base hit. Instead, it was a foul ball. But that's it. It was a foul ball. And so, Javi Baez is not that far away. And he's 3 for his last 10. Now, small sample, but 3 for his last 10 means he's hitting 300 over his last 3 games. That's 100 points higher than what Javi Baez is hitting this season. And now I want to get to when you drafted your fantasy teams this year. And let's say you had a top 5 pick in a redraft league. And there's Trout, and there's Acuna, and there's Christian Yelich. And Trout has been, well, Trout. And I saw where his baseball card yesterday sold for over $3 million. Yeah, there you go. And Acuna's been on the IL. And hopefully back soon. And Yelich has not been on the IL, but he has not been Yelich. CY is hitting 194, 7 home runs, 15 RBIs. He's 4 for his last 19 over 5 games. That's a 211 average. This weekend against the Pirates, he goes 1 for 11. That's an 091 average against the Pirates. I didn't say against the Braves. I didn't say against the Cubs. I didn't say against the Dodgers. I said against the Pirates, who are 7-17, 8.5 games behind in their division, but they beat the Brewers 3 straight this weekend. What's wrong with Yelich? And if and when will Yelich turn it around? Here's how bad it's gotten for Yelich. Last night I made a trade offer. Why not? So I offered Christian Yelich for Jacob deGrom. Thinking, deGrom really hasn't had a deGrom season, but Yelich hadn't had one either. So why not put them in a different environment, virally, and let's see how they do. Well, the guy I offered the trade to responds and says, I don't want Yelich, I want Trey Turner. So now Yelich value. Can you trade and get him in your league? Because if you can trade and get him, there's no sign of injury here. Go get him. Go get him now. Again, I offered him for deGrom, and the deGrom owner said, I won't trade him for Yelich, but I'll trade him for Trey Turner. I'm not knocking Trey Turner. I think it's an indictment on what CY has done so far in 2020. And if you can get him in your league, go trade for him. While I'm on the downside this morning, these are all values, okay? I'm giving you these players because I think it's time to go trade and get them. Because a lot of times, I was listening to a radio show this morning, getting ready for this one. I listen to a lot of stuff all at one time. I got radios going everywhere. And a baseball card was an issue. And I've heard so many times, typically, superstars will play to what their baseball cards say. And if that's the case, every player we've already talked about this morning is a player you should go and be interested in getting. Here's another one. George Springer for the Astros, who's hitting 200, 4 homers, 15 RBIs. Not a George Springer year so far. Relatively healthy. Over his last 5 games, he's 4 for 20, exactly 200. That's exactly what he's hitting for the entire season. But atop of that Astro lineup, which is still pretty good, and Michael Brantley came back, and Altuve's starting to hit a little bit. And Kyle Tucker, I think he's better than his numbers have said so far. His numbers haven't been bad, but he's been better than that. Springer's going to do better. Springer, Yelich, Javier Baez, these are all values. Go trade for them now in your fantasy league. Now I want to give you 2 at the end. I'm going to go through a DFS scenario with you in just a moment. But I got 2 players here. One you can probably go get. And here's one I'm just not carried away with this year. Eduardo Escobar. Now everyone else I've talked about, Springer and Yelich and Javier Baez and Moustakas and Hoskins and Olsen, I've said they're values. Go get them. I challenge you, is Eduardo Escobar in that same group? He's hitting 188. Look, Escobar, 30 homer plus seasons the last 2 years. Playing in Arizona, he's hitting 188 with 3 homers and 15 RBIs. Over his last 5 games, he's 3 for 19. That's a 158 average. 30 points below his season average. Is Escobar a value, or is Escobar someone that you should send to the waiver wire? I'm more inclined of all the players I've talked about so far to say, if I were going to dump anyone, it would be Escobar. Here's a player that I think you should add. He's only hitting 151 on the season. Okay? But a few years ago, he was a highly touted prospect. He's an outfielder. He's got all the tools. He's had some injuries, but it appears now he's healthy. And Gregory Polanco for the Pirates over the weekend against the Brewers played in all 3 games. He went 5 for 10. He scored 3 runs. He stole 2 bases. He hit 2 home runs, and he drove in 5. Polanco, I think, with the trade deadline looming, would be a great player to go and trade for in reality. I think he's a great player to add in fantasy. So, I'm going to suggest to you that when it comes to Gregory Polanco, take a good look at him, and I would add him in fantasy. I want to spend the last few minutes this morning talking about DFS for today. I want to first start with 2 starting pitchers I want you to consider. One, pretty obvious, Lance Lynn. He's been one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball this year. Okay? He's averaged 26 points over his last 6 starts. He's never scored less than 19 points. And he faces an A's team tonight that has a 25% strikeout rate versus right-handed pitchers in 2020. Also, Brad Keller, whose price I believe is $6,700. He faces a Cardinals team, and the Cardinals team who has struggled against right-handed pitchers. St. Louis has a 24.1% K percentage versus right-handed pitchers. And outside of Paul Goldschmidt and Tyler O'Neill, no Cardinal has over a 300 on-base average against right-handed pitching in 2020. So those are my 2 pitchers for the day. Lance Lynn and Brad Keller. Now let's look at some players. Matt Davidson facing a left-hander today in Milwaukee. Davidson cannot hit right-handers, but he mashes lefties. I know he only has 17 plate appearances against left-handers this year, but in that small sample, he has a .563 on-base average with an 84, let's check this out, 84.4% contact rate. He faces left-hander Brett Anderson on Monday and will bat third in one of the best hitting parks in all of the US of A. Continuing on that theme of a right-handed Cincinnati Red, Eugenio Suarez. I think Suarez, who hit a homer yesterday, could also go deep today. He has a .401 on-base average against left-handers since the start of 2019. Anderson has a .540 ERA at home this season. To me, Davidson will be cheap. Suarez not a lot more expensive, but they're great picks today in DFS. Now, Anthony Rendon, a little higher price here, but he just keeps on hitting. He's in prime form. The Angels face a left-handed pitcher in Framber Valdez tonight. And since the start of 2019, Rendon has a .426 on-base average, a .298 ISO versus left-handers, and an 86.1% contact rate, a 45.8% hard hit rate against lefties. David Fletcher, nothing flashy, but he just keeps putting up points. He'll bat leadoff against Framber Valdez. He has an insane, 94.6% contact versus left-handed pitchers since the start of last year. So if he swings, he hits it. Fletcher, 4,600. Yuli Gurriel. He'll bat fifth. He'll face a lefty. And Gurriel has a 93.5% contact rate this year against left-handers. This is your DFS lineup, guys. You got to listen to this stuff. Phil Chaplin, if you're out there, I know you're listening. Ian Happ playing at Detroit, $3,900. He'll bat leadoff